Today's topic, China and the threat to the homeland, is an existential threat. It's the most complex, pernicious, aggressive, strategic threat our nation has ever faced. I proffer to this subcommittee that the U.S. private sector and academia have become the geopolitical battle space for China. Xi Jinping has one goal: to be the geopolitical, military, and economic leader of the world, period. Along with the Ministry of State Security, the People's Liberation Army, and the United Front Work Department, they drive a comprehensive whole-of-country approach to their efforts to invest, leverage, infiltrate, influence, and steal from every corner of the United States. This is a generational battle for Xi, and it drives their every decision. We must approach this threat from the Communist Party of China with the same sense of urgency, spending, and strategy we have done for the past 2 decades to combat terrorism. I would offer to this subcommittee that we are in a terrorism event, a slow, methodical, strategic, persistent, and enduring event which requires, in response, a degree of urgency of action. Let me be more specific. The Communist Party of China's capabilities and intent are second to none as an adversary. The cyber breaches, insider threats, surveillance and penetrations into our critical infrastructure, of which 85% is owned by the private sector, have all been widely reported. There's much more in the classified realm, but we've become numb to it as a nation. Additionally, it's estimated that 80% of American adults have had all of their private data stolen by the Communist Party of China. The other 20%, just most of it. Layering in the Communist Party of China's crippling stranglehold on many aspects of our supply chain, and what results is a daunting vulnerability and susceptibility of unacceptable proportions. When we layer in the current threat landscape, the sophisticated surveillance balloons, maritime port surveillance, strategic land purchases by military bases, terrestrial and space-based 5G threats, US-based Chinese police stations, Huawei, and TikTok, the collage begins to paint a very bleak mosaic. From a cybersecurity perspective, China possesses persistent and unending resources to penetrate our systems and exfiltrate our data, or sit dormant and wait or plant malware on critical infrastructure for future hostilities. At the same time, the insider threat epidemic originating from the Communist Party of China has been nothing short of devastating to the U.S. corporate world. Additionally, the Communist Party of China strategically conducts malign influence campaigns at the state and local level with precision. This effort must be exposed and mitigated. So why does it all matter? Economic security is national security. Our economic global supremacy, stability, and long-term vitality is at risk. It's squarely in the crosshairs of Xi Jinping and the communist regime. In 2020, the estimated economic loss from theft of intellectual property and trade secrets just from the Communist Party of China, just from what we know in prosecutions, is between $300 billion and $500 billion per year. That equates to about $4,000 to $6,000 per year for an American family of 4 after taxes. The cost is real. So how do we mitigate these threats? We must create a robust public-private partnership with real intelligence sharing, while at the same time staying true to our core values, morals, and rule of law, which made America the greatest country the world has ever seen. This will take a whole-nation approach. It will take time, and such approach must start with contextual awareness campaigns reaching a broad audience from every level of government to chambers of commerces to university campuses and from the boardrooms to the business schools, because the why matters. U.S. boards of directors and investment leaders must begin to look beyond the next fiscal quarter earnings and begin to think strategically about how their investment decisions and awareness of the long-term threat can impact not only their business model, but the economic and national interest of the United States. In conclusion, I investigated terror attacks after September 11th and led counterintelligence programs for the FBI. I would suggest that the threat posed by China is much more dangerous to the longevity and sustainability of our nation than any terrorist threat actor. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evanina. And I now recognize General Gostella for his opening statement. Chairman Pfluger, Ranking Member Magaziner, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. As an individual who spent over 3 decades in service to our nation, I am also deeply concerned about the threats the Chinese Communist Party drives towards the U.S. homeland, especially in the military swim lane. And that's why events like this today are so important. On my last assignment on active duty, I was the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations for the United States Air Force. Our job was to organize, train, and equip forces, air forces, and then present those forces to the combatant commanders around the world. That includes NORAD Northcom, the command in charge of Homeland Defense. I also developed a very good understanding of the threats that China poses to the United States and the capabilities they use to achieve those objectives. I'd first like to highlight begin describing the threat that China poses to the United States and its allies. So in 1991, when the U.S. was celebrating the end of the Cold War, and we also were celebrating victory in Operation Desert Storm, China went to school on us. They took note, and they started a very concerted and deliberate effort to modernize their military capabilities. And here we are, 3 decades later, and they have largely met that mark. And they even seek further progress. That's why this year they saw even a significant increase in their defense spending. Their military now enjoys leading-edge capabilities that include long-range precision strike, hypersonic weapons, advanced integrated air and defense weapons, stealthy aircraft, surface-to-air missiles, and electronic warfare. And several of those systems have the range to hold the U.S. homeland at risk. And so the Chinese spy balloon, as was mentioned before, which garnered significant attention this past February, is a very loud wake-up call regarding the CCP's global ambition. Unfortunately, the U.S. is stretched thin when it comes to the capabilities and the capacity required to defend our homeland in the air domain, air and space domain. NORAD was originally designed to detect and defend North America from a catastrophic attack from the Soviet Union, later Russia. An additional role was added on after 9/11 to intercept, identify, and redirect unidentified aircraft that are approaching restricted areas. So the NORAD radars were optimized and tuned to detect aircraft that met those criteria. So balloons, until recently, generally did not fit in that category. But as threats evolve, including balloons, stealth aircraft, UASs, unmanned aerial systems, cruise missiles, so must our detection and defense enterprise. This will require that we modernize current radars and install new sensors in emerging zones of vulnerability, not just over the nation, but well outside our sovereign territory so we can get a heads up that they're coming. We must invest resources in the NORAD mission. That command gets its aircraft from the U.S. Air Force, but the Air Force today is the oldest and the smallest it's ever been in history. We're still flying B-52s that are 60 years old, tankers that are over 50 years old, fighters over 30 years old. Even the famed F-22, the best air-to-air fighter ever made, first flew in 1997. The Homeland Defense, however, doesn't start here in the homeland. Homeland Defense starts abroad with the combatant commanders that have the forces that are capable of an offensive punch against our adversary countries that deters them from attacking us. That's where it begins. The Air Force has to be modernized in the numbers necessary to meet the demands of the National Defense Strategy, as well as to deter threats against our homeland. More specifically, consider the Air Force's fighter inventory is too small to meet real-world demands. It's a major security concern, for while other services possess fighters, the Air Force is specifically tasked with Homeland Security, the air sovereignty mission. The Air National Guard is the entity within the Air Force that bears the preponderance of homeland defense. And their mission is particularly hard hit by the gap between old aircraft that are aging out of the inventory and a lack of new aircraft arriving to backfill those spots on the ramp. So Homeland Defense also requires investment in modernization and command and control, resiliency, ground and space-based sensors, data fusion, air refueling capabilities. Homeland Defense is our highest priority mission. We need to start treating it that way. And one war story, to share with the group here. On January 8th, 2020, 11 Iranian ballistic missiles hit a U.S. base at Al-Assad in Iraq. I was the Coalition Forces Air Component Commander at that time. We possessed the intelligence about the attack that was going to happen. We were able to detect the missiles at launch. We were able to track the trajectory. But when it came to shooting them down, to defeating the missiles, we lacked any options. Why? Because we did not have the capacity, the defensive capacity, due to the other global commitments that our force was spread across. American service members had to ride out that attack and hope for the best. It was an appalling set of circumstances. Let's think what could happen against our homeland with threats like that. Adversaries like China understand these vulnerabilities. The United States is gradually waking up to this reality, but leaders have yet to seriously address the shortfall. We're still in a problem admiring phase, not in a solution implementation phase. That has to change. So we have the bravest men and women in uniform, but we owe it to them to ensure they're prepared for the mission we ask them to execute. We owe it to our American citizens to ensure they're protected from attack. America's homeland is no longer a sanctuary against threats like China. We must recognize this new reality and aggressively close critical gaps in capacity and capability in the air domain. Thank you for allowing us to focus on this topic.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.